Hello everyone. As our last video, I want to talk about some theories of motivation and how this plays into adolescent development. It's not unusual for adults to believe that 10 to 15-year-olds rarely inject anything but minimal energy into their studies. Instead, they demand, when are we ever going to use this? You don't take us seriously. How can I make so-and-so like me? It's easy for adults who've forgotten the wonder and uncertainty of these adolescent years to declare that students today are more interested in school and undisciplined in life than they were at that age. It's a false observation, however, and a new set of mature adults has declared the same thing about the set of young teenagers behind them. Yet so far, humans are still striving. Let's start looking at motivation by operationally defining the word. We're going to define motivation as individual forces that account for the direction, level, and persistence of a person's effort expended at work. There are three elements of motivation: direction, an individual's choice when presented with a number of possible alternatives; energy level, the amount of effort a person puts forth; and persistence, the length of time a person sticks with a given action. The energy element is a measure of intensity, drive, and vigor. A motivated person puts forth a lot of effort and works hard. However, the quality of the effort must be considered as well as its intensity. High levels of effort don't necessarily lead to favorable performance unless the effort is channeled in the direction that it was intended to be directed. Effort that is directed toward and consistent with academic goals is the kind of effort we want from our students. Have you ever heard of a person with a broken spirit? A person who is quote-unquote damaged goods? The force that actuates our mind is the force that is the seat of motivation. It goes deeper than just a reason for acting or behaving. Motivation is a force that works within our minds. There are several theories that attempt to explain the role of motivation in our lives. These are two we will discuss in detail. The content theory of motivation, aka the need for theories, and the process theories of motivation. Content theory of motivation is concerned with the internal factors that actuate human behavior. Two of the most common content theories are Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Alderfer's ERG theory, whereas the content theories concentrate on the question of what motivates. The process theories address more the issue relating to how the process works and sustains itself over time, such as factors that determine the degree of effort, the continuation of effort, the modification of effort, etc. These might include things like equity theory and goal theory. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a motivational theory in psychology comprising of a 5-tier model of human needs, often depicted as a hierarchical levels within a pyramid. It identifies 5 levels of individual needs and assumes that some needs are more important than others and must be satisfied linearly before the other needs can serve as motivators. Maslow initially stated that individuals are motivated by the need to satisfy lower-level deficit needs before progressing on to meet higher-level growth needs. However, he later clarified that satisfaction of needs is not all or none phenomenon, admitting that his earlier statements may have given the false impression that a need must be satisfied 100% before the next need emerges. First, let's discuss each stage. The lowest stage is for physiological needs, things like food, water, air, sleep, shelter. For instance, among teenagers, sleep deprivation has become the norm rather than the exception, with surveys reporting that between 50% and 90% of teenagers are failing to meet this physiological need. Safety needs come right after physiological needs, as they also relate to our basic health and well-being. This is about physical safety, such as protection from violence, but also about financial security, freedom from accidents, and the security of easily accessible health care. More generally, having your safety needs met means that you aren't regularly afraid of anything. You're not afraid of having a debilitating accident or contracting a dangerous disease, of getting into financial difficulties, or of being physically attacked. But having this need met isn't just about living in a safe country with good social norms. Workplace or school bullying, for instance, can mean that safety needs are not met from physical attack, from emotional attack, from fatal disease, from invasion, or extreme losses. When frightened, our thoughts and energies are diverted. Threat of or actual attack creates the fight or flight reaction. This can be a threat to our safety, both physically and emotionally. The next need is the psychological need. This has been described as belongingness and love, which perhaps addresses its scope more accurately. We need friendships, family connections, and emotional intimacy with others. Different people in different societies meet this need in different ways. For some people, their need for social belonging might be met entirely within their extended family. For others, it might be organized activities such as a church community. Others, it might be a network of friendships and romantic relationships that meet this need. It's also worth noting that meeting this need can enable us to overcome a lack of our basic needs. People suffering hardships in war zones, lacking safety, or famines, lacking food, often manage to keep going through their strength of their relationships with others. Maslow noted that self-esteem comes in two different forms. The lower form is the need for the esteem of others. We need our colleagues, peers, and friends to respect us and the work that we do, to value our contribution to society, to think well of us. The need for the esteem of others is often referenced in workplace contexts, but having the esteem of our friends is just as important. The higher form of esteem is self-esteem or self-respect. It's higher because people with self-esteem still have their need for esteem met, even in circumstances that others around them don't respect them. Being without either kind of esteem can leave you feeling useless, helpless, or inferior. The need for belonging and the need for esteem are classified as psychological needs. Teens can be very sensitive when it comes to esteem in middle and high school. Popularity reigns supreme when talking about adolescents' esteem needs in their school social group. To break it down, there are 4 statuses adolescents can fall into: popular, controversial, rejected, and neglected. Popular and controversial tend to be on the upper end of the status, while the rejected and neglected fall into the lower status. This is important when talking about adolescent esteem. They spend more time with peers at school than with family, so most teens place a large importance on how others view them. In fact, when peers treat them and view them as losers, quote-unquote losers, it will change the way that a teen may perceive themselves. Respect from others can come through awards and honors, and respect for their self through mastery of achievement and competence. At the pinnacle of Maslow's original hierarchy was self-actualization. This is perhaps the hardest level to define, as it means different things to different people. Broadly, it's about fulfilling the extent of our own potential across all the areas that are personally important to you. It's not about depending on the opinions of others, but about knowing what matters most to you, achieving it, and finding satisfaction in that. It involves a high level of self-awareness, and unlike others' needs on the hierarchy, cannot be achieved without a person's basic needs being met. Maslow felt achieving self-actualization was rare, as people's goals seldom match their lives. In psychology, self-actualization is achieved when you're able to reach your full potential. Being truly self-actualized is considered the exception rather than the rule, since most people are working to meet more pressing needs. It is not common to find these attributes in teens. Erikson states that adolescents are going through the identity versus identity confusion state. And from this theory, we can get a good grasp of where they are with self-actualization. The term identity versus identity confusion means a period during which teenagers seek to determine what is unique and distinctive about themselves. This is not to say that adolescents are unaware of their capability. However, they are still discovering new abilities while trying to decide who they really are. Alderfer's theory is based on existence, relatedness, and growth, known as ERG. Alderfer attempted to redesign Maslow's work into concentric circles. The existence circle, in red, is analogous to Maslow's psychological and safety needs. The relatedness circle is analogous to Maslow's love and belonging need and some of the esteem needs. The growth circle is related to some of the esteem needs and the self-actualization characteristics. When we compare Maslow and Alderfer, they both seek to explain human motivation and how it affects behavior. Both theories are rooted in the idea that there are basic needs that drive people to do certain things and to behave in certain ways. Another similarity is that both theories have a hierarchical framework, with primitive needs at the bottom and more refined needs at the top. One of the primary differences between these two theories is that Maslow's theory has 5 ascending levels, and the ERG theory only has 3 levels. In fact, the ERG theory existence equates to Maslow's first 2 levels of physical and security needs. Relatedness equates to Maslow's next 2 levels of social needs and ego needs, and growth equates to Maslow's final level of self-actualization. Another difference is that Maslow believes that each need is fulfilled one at a time in ascending order, whereas Alderfer believes that more than one need can be fulfilled at the same time. In other words, Maslow's theory is that everyone needs to progress through specific 5-level pyramid structure, whereas the ERG theory is that people satisfy their needs in different ways at different levels. In 2007, Native American child welfare expert Terry Cross developed a relational worldview model that rearranges the needs of a person. It is founded on cultural perpetuity, which is described by many cultures as the quote-unquote breath of life. It is the understanding that you will be forgotten, but you have a part in ensuring that your people's important teachings live on. Therefore, work that studies the breath of life theory attempts to determine where the amount of ancestral influence may render welfare systems, in effect, harmful to First Nations. Cross attempted to reinterpret it from the point of view of indigenous people, where their spirituality exceeds all other levels. Here is the example where the hierarchy depends on how much culture, law, etc. is influenced by the balance of community and personal interest. Self-actualization is at the bottom as a starting point. The self was only the beginning for the indigenous people, who placed community actualization and cultural continuity above the individual. Maslow's Western lens flipped it around to prioritize the individual. For example, Canadian research on indigenous nations versus Western cultures show that the imposition of Western child protection systems has failed indigenous nation children. They lead to an increase of structural risks such as service inequities, poverty, poor housing, substance misuse due to an imbalance between the theory's principles and the community's culture. The Thematic Apperception Test T.A.T is a projective psychological test. Proponents of the technique assert that subjects' response in their narratives they make about ambiguous pictures of people reveal their underlying motives, concerns, and the way they see the social world. Insight on students' unconscious needs. The chief risks involved in taking the T.A.T are that they are a bad fit between the examiner and the test subject and misuse of results. As far as parental concerns, the T.A.T does not yield a score, so its results can be difficult to interpret. It is important for parents to remember that the results of a single personality test may not accurately reflect the child's skills, talents, or problems, and that there should not be too much emphasis placed upon the results of a single test. With no score, it is also difficult to obtain information about reliability and validity. I've seen these pictures in people's classrooms where they might just have them up. For example, they might have this photo of this little boy here, or these two women here, or here, and just ask students, what do you think is happening in the picture? Not that there's a key that you can actually look into, but it might give you some perceptions of whether this person is seeing something positive, it's something that they want to share, it might remind them of something. It's interesting what responses you get as they're put up in your room. So now I want to talk about the process theories of motivation. So the first one is the equity theory, and equity theory is a version of discrepancy theory, which focuses on the discrepancies between what one has and what one thinks is fair or what one should have. The social construct is studied in many fields, but particularly in management and education. In order for inequity theory to occur, there has to be the foundation of equity in a social comparison. The inequity must cause tension or dissonance. The level of discrepancy corresponds with the tension, and the amount of tension corresponds with the energy an individual might expend to alleviate the discrepancy. Any perceived inequity becomes a motivating state of mind. People are motivated to behave in ways that restore equity in situations. This reminds me of another clip. In Legally Blonde, Elle Woods, a California sorority girl with a fashion degree, wants to attend Harvard Law School to regain the affections of her boyfriend who left her for a more respectable girl, quote unquote, respectable girl. She decides that the best way to win him back is to become a law student, and so therefore she will be as desirable as the other girl. She gets into Harvard, yet she still does not receive the respect she believes she deserves. Watch the clip to see how she is motivated to be viewed as equally valuable. I'll have it in the description box below. Equity theory can be viewed as a balanced scale. When the scale is balanced, the input of effort receives an output equal with the person in the comparison group. When the scale is tipped negatively, the input of the effort receives an output less than that of the comparison person or group. When the scale is tipped positively, in the favor of the person, the input of the effort receives an output greater than that of the comparison group. If students perceive inequity, they can be predicted to make one of the following choices. They could abandon the task, they could change the person to which they are being compared, look for someone that they might not have as much value and compare themselves to them. They could psychologically distort the comparisons, so come up with some scenario in their mind which lends to reasons why there was an inequity. Or they can take actions to change the inputs or the outputs of the comparison person, so try to sabotage that other person's work. By taking a responsive classroom approach in your classroom, you can attempt to affect some of these behaviors. You can do things like creating engaging academic activities, have a strong command of the curriculum content, and skillfully deploy strategies and practices to create an engaging learning environment that accounts for learner variability. Create a positive community, model caring, kindness, inclusiveness, and respect for all students, and use learning structures and teacher language to teach students to develop and demonstrate the same. Have effective management. Create a classroom that is safe and predictable and proactively teaches routines and expectations that ensure the classroom operates smoothly and efficiently. Or developmental awareness. Use knowledge of child and adolescent development along with regular observations of students to inform all the decisions in the classroom. Another way that organizational theories have been applied to education is through the principles of justice in a society. This helps people identify mutual and social responsibilities and define who and why their society will reward. The distributive justice assumes that there is a large amount of fairness in the distribution of goods, like respect, grades, etc. Equal work should provide individuals with an equal outcome in terms of goods acquired or the ability to acquire goods. When teachers effectively exercise interactional justice, they are open, consistent, and fair to the students. For example, when a teacher is exercising interactional justice, she or he will reward a student based on experience, merit, or performance. Procedural justice is the idea of fairness in the processes that resolve disputes. One aspect of procedural justice is related to the decisions for punishment and rewards. Procedural components that may be implemented by either a principal, a dean, a vice principal, or a teacher. Recently, there's been a study to determine secondary public school teachers' perceptions about organizational justice theory and whether these perceptions differ across gender, age, seniority, branch, educational background, and the number of students with the number of teachers. In the study, it was seen that secondary school teachers did not have high organizational justice perceptions. Measures to increase these perceptions should be taken by school administrators. Also, the participants least agreed with the following items. No one is preferentially treated in the school, and the school principal treats everyone equally. School administrators must be more sensible when treating equal people equally and fairly. It was found that the organizational justice perceptions of teachers in small schools was lower, although perceptions of the participants did not differ according to the number of teachers in service, but they differed according to the number of students. Future studies might examine large schools versus small schools concerning organizational justice perceptions. In comparison to gender, there were differences found in some studies, whereas others did not observe any. Future studies should use this variable as important in terms of obtaining generalizable information. Finally, the effects of organizational structure and personal traits on organizational justice perceptions must be examined. The next process motivation theory is goal-setting theory. So goal-setting theory for teens can be daunting. Teens have big ideas and big dreams, but don't yet have the experience of breaking down and organizing a goal into steps. Goals like get A's in all my classes or save enough money for a car can end in disappointment or abandonment if the steps aren't thought of carefully. Besides developing a growth mindset, effective goal setting creates other benefits for teens. For example, even if students do not pass AP exams, studies show that students enrolled in AP courses fare better in their non-AP courses than peers that are not enrolled in any AP classes. It teaches teens to organize time and tasks. It can increase motivation, self-efficacy, and a sense of achievement. It shows teens how others are accountable and inspiring. And it gives parents, teachers, and other adults an opportunity to partner with teens and support their passions and interests. Also, think of the following tips. Make sure that it's the teen's goal, not the parents, not the teachers. Like I said, support interests whenever possible. Encourage students to enjoy the journey and not so much reach the destination. And also help them see deeper values and benefits. For example, helping others, seeing why setting a goal and reaching it matters in the long run. Character development is just as important as the goal that they set out to do. So in this slide, it's just kind of a repeat of what I talked about in the last slide. First one is make sure it's the teen's goal. The second is that setting deadlines or having small milestones throughout the process can also improve the effectiveness of the goals. So the last thing we're going to talk about is what moves the needle. How can we make things even better for our students? It's really simple. It's feedback. Feedback is more likely to motivate people towards higher performance by encouraging the setting of higher performance goals. Think of an athlete or performer. Their coaches and teachers gave them constant feedback to make them better. There's a lot of research about feedback, and what they found is academic feedback is more strongly and consistently related to achievement than any other teaching behavior. The relationship is consistent regardless of grade, socioeconomic status, race, or school setting. And when feedback and corrective procedures are used, most students can attain the same level of achievement as the top 20% of students. We all have a lot of students. It's really difficult to give every student the amount of feedback that they need every day. So we have to think about how we can use more powerful feedback to manage the many students that we have to teach. Feedback has been broken down into 4 different types of feedback. So the least effective feedback is self-level feedback, and the highest level feedback is self-regulation level feedback. This is the first type of feedback that we're going to talk about, self-level feedback, and as I mentioned just now, it's the least effective feedback, but actually it's the most used, and it feels really great when you get it. These are things like good job, nice work, you got a star, there's a happy face, you're so smart. These things do not move the needle. It directs attention away from the task and the learning and cannot be tied directly to the task. Some studies show that it can even be counterproductive to students' abilities to self-evaluate their work and adds to a fixed mindset mentality. By giving a student praise, it doesn't tell them exactly what they need to do in order to improve what they've done, improve on the task, become a better writer, become a better reader, be able to perform math calculations more fluently, have a better conceptual understanding of mathematics, understand the intricacies of science and how it all connects in some way. Task level feedback is the next most powerful feedback. So it's a little bit better. I should say it's a little bit better than self-level feedback. Task level feedback is specific to how well specific tasks are understood and or performed. As a math teacher, I give a lot of task level feedback. Whenever I mark a question correct or incorrect, it gives the student information about the task, but it doesn't give them any information on how to improve. Process level feedback is the next best type of feedback. It's specific to processes that are underlying tasks or related and extended tasks. For process level feedback, teachers should teach strategies that can reduce errors. That's one thing they can do. So things like reread your work. If you're a teacher and you know about POLIA strategies, using POLIA strategies, things that can just be important to do as just a regular writer as students improve with their writing in any topic. Things like checking the start of each sentence for a capital and the end of each sentence for punctuation. Are you varying the word that you start each sentence with? That's a huge thing. So these strategies may be useful in other subjects besides just your discipline, and they become sort of a tool where the feedback becomes a tool that they can use in order to apply to a variety of things. The highest level feedback is self-regulation level feedback, and it addresses a student's ability to monitor, direct, and regulate action towards the learning goal. Instead of helping them become better at a particular skill or task, you're helping them self-regulate their own learning. Less effective learners have low self-regulation, where highly effective learners have high self-regulation. I've had students where they wanted to do a problem, they would do it perfectly, and then they'd need for me to check it to make sure that they knew that they had gotten it correct. And then they'd go back and do one more, and they'd come back to me for affirmation. These students may or may not have the confidence in themselves to know that they're doing this correctly. Also, another thing too to consider is that many students that do not ask for help may not be engaging in self-regulating behaviors. So emotional factors may play a role in this as well. So we've got a lot of takeaways in this little video. First is that motivation theories are largely developed from the North American or Western culture perspective, and they are subject to cultural limitations and contingencies. Also, as we look at motivation, equity theories will give you information about the process and the beliefs of equity, and strategies to help mitigate inequity and increase self-regulation and self-efficacy are supporting students as they create their goals and also give them feedback that they can implement in a variety of ways. Have a great week. Bye.